For a long time, cheating in shooter games felt pretty straightforward. You had the obvious aimbots, spin hackers, and players snapping instantly from one target to another in ways that weren't clearly possible for a real person to do. Even if anti-cheat systems weren't perfect, there was still a basic understanding of how the whole thing worked. Someone would download cheating software, the anti-cheat eventually detected it, and they got banned. That was just part of online gaming for years, and most people assumed that's how cheating would always work. But over the last few years, something has changed, and I don't think most players fully realize how big that shift actually is yet. Cheating stopped being about doing impossible things in obvious ways, and instead, it started to become about looking as human as possible. Modern cheats aren't trying to snap across the screen anymore, they're trying to blend in. They're trying to aim just natural enough that both players and anti-cheat systems struggle to confidently tell whether something is legitimate or not. Once you start looking at it that way, you begin to understand why so many developers are suddenly investing heavily into AI anti-cheat technology. This isn't just about detecting modified game files or injected software anymore. This is becoming a much bigger problem than that. Developers are now trying to answer a really difficult question, which is what does real human gameplay actually look like? That's what makes the current situation so unsettling. Some of the most advanced cheats today don't even behave like traditional cheats at all. In many ways, they're specifically designed to avoid interacting directly with the game because cheat developers know that's exactly what anti-cheat systems are built to look for. Instead of modifying the game itself, some cheats now use computer vision systems that literally watch the game screen in the same way a human player would. The AI analyzes what appears on the monitor in real time, identifies enemies visually, and tracks movement, predicts positioning, and assists aiming externally, all without necessarily touching the game files or memory in a way that traditional anti-cheat can easily detect. One of the biggest developments right now involves something called DMA hardware cheating, which stands for direct memory access. These setups use external hardware connected through PCIe slots to access game data from outside the PC itself. In practice, some people are now running full 2 PC setups to cheat, where one PC runs the game while the other completely separate machine handles the cheat software, target analysis, and the aiming assistance. That detail matters because traditional anti-cheat systems were built around the assumption that cheats exist somewhere inside the gaming environment. But if the cheat never directly interacts with the game the way the anti-cheat expects, detecting it becomes dramatically harder. From the game's perspective, it can look like a player with really strong aim or unusually good mechanics. That's why companies have started going much deeper into hardware-level security over the past few years. Riot Games, for example, has invested heavily into Vanguard, a kernel-level anti-cheat system that operates deep inside the operating system itself. Riot has even talked publicly about the vulnerabilities related to DMA-based cheating and motherboard firmware security, which honestly sounds more like cybersecurity infrastructure than actual video game anti-cheats at this point. When you think about it, the evolution here is actually insane. We went from kids downloading sketchy wallhacks off random websites to developers monitoring BIOS security behavior and hardware communication systems just to protect competitive matchmaking. At this point, it isn't just a gaming problem anymore, it's becoming a full-scale technological arms race. The reason this escalation matters so much is because AI-assisted cheating creates a problem traditional anti-cheat systems were never really designed to solve. Older anti-cheat software mostly focuses on detecting unauthorized programs running on your machine, signature scanning, memory inspection, process monitoring. All of that worked well during a time when cheats directly modified the game itself, but modern cheating is now shifting away from software detection and moving towards behavior. This is a fundamental change because now the question isn't simple. Is cheating software running on this PC? Now the question becomes, does this player actually behave like a human? That's where AI anti-cheat starts to feel less like some futuristic buzzword and more like something the industry may genuinely need. Modern anti-cheat systems are increasingly focused on behavioral analysis rather than just software detection. Instead of only checking what's installed on your computer, they're now analyzing huge amounts of gameplay data. This is reaction times, recoil control, mouse pattern movements, target switching, tracking consistency, the list goes on. And long-term player behavior over thousands of matches is just the start. Activision's Ricochet anti-cheat overview has openly discussed how server-side analytics and behavior monitoring are becoming a major part of modern anti-cheat systems. Researchers are also building in machine learning models specifically designed to identify suspicious aiming patterns through movement analysis and statistical detection. Once you understand where cheating technology is heading, it becomes very difficult to imagine any other realistic solution. Modern AI-assisted cheats are no longer trying to look perfect, they're actually just trying to look believable. Older aimbots usually gave themselves away because they looked robotic. They would instantly snap, impossible tracking, perfectly smooth aim. Even average players could often tell something looked wrong, but newer systems intentionally try and simulate human inconsistency. Some cheats now deliberately add delays, hesitation, they miss shots, they have overcorrections, and random movement patterns specifically to avoid looking unnatural. This is the greatest shift that's happening here, because the goal isn't to create impossible gameplay anymore. The goal is to create gameplay that feels plausibly human. Once cheating reaches that point, human judgment alone starts to become unreliable. I think players have already started to feel this happen subconsciously in modern shooters. Think about games like Tarkov and Warzone, where suspicious deaths often fall into this weird grey area where you generally can't tell whether someone's actually highly skilled, incredibly lucky, you're dealing with desync, or they are quietly using some kind of assistance. That uncertainty changes how multiplayer games feel emotionally. Because cheating doesn't damage balance, it damages the trust of the players. And the trust is probably the most important invisible system in competitive gaming. This damage becomes especially important in extraction shooters like Grey Zone Warfare, Escape from Tarkov, Hunt Showdown, where the deaths actually carry weight. Players aren't just losing a round there, they're losing their gear, they're losing their time, their progression, their effort, and sometimes hours of preparation. One suspicious death can completely destroy someone's confidence into the fairness of their experience. That's why cheating feels almost existential. If players stop believing deaths are legitimate, the entire gameplay loop starts falling apart psychologically. Now, I think this is where the AI conversation becomes genuinely interesting, because AI is usually framed as the villain in gaming discussions, right? People talking about AI ruining creativity, replacing developers, generating fake content, or creating advanced cheats. Competitive shooters may now end up in a strange situation where AI becomes one of the only things capable of preserving its legitimacy instead of destroying it. Us humans are simply not capable of reliably detecting advanced cheating at scale anymore. The cheats are getting too good, the behavior is too subtle, the data is too massive, the technology is evolving too fast for us. So developers are increasingly building systems designed to answer that very question. That question is simple. What does authentic human gameplay statistically look like? Once you start thinking about it in that way, the entire issue begins to feel much bigger than cheating alone. Competitive games may eventually build long-term behavioral profiles around you as the actual player, not necessarily because developers want to invade your privacy, but because maintaining fair competition requires understanding how players naturally move, naturally react, they aim, and they engage over time. This will look at your recoil habits, your sensitivity usage, your movement rhythm, even your reaction time. All of it could eventually become part of the behavioral identity system. Now, that doesn't come without some security issues here, because the deeper anti-cheat systems go, the more invasive they become. We already know kernel-level anti-cheat has already sparked huge debate around privacy, security, system access, and always-on monitoring. A lot of us are understandably uncomfortable with this software that deeply goes inside of their PC, even if the goal is fair competition. Despite those concerns, developers continue pushing further because they understand something important. If players lose trust in the competitive integrity, then the multiplayer games slowly start collapsing under paranoia. Personally, I already think we're starting to see that right now. Modern shooter communities are constantly debating soft aim, DMA uses, suspicious recoil control, and whether or not top-level gameplay is even legitimate anymore. Entire communities break down clips frame by frame, trying to decide whether or not someone is genuinely talented or secretly assisted. The paranoia itself is becoming part of that gaming culture, where one clip can go viral in seconds. This is why the AI arms race matters so much. Because the real danger isn't that cheating exists, because it always has. The real danger is reaching a point where nobody can confidently tell what's real anymore. Once competitive gaming loses that sense of authenticity, every incredible play starts carrying doubt alongside it. The second you hit a crispy shot on stream, somebody says check task manager. The scary reality is that this probably doesn't stop anytime soon either. Cheat developers will keep using AI. Anti-cheat systems will keep responding to that AI. Both sides will continue to adapt against each other in an endless cycle that increasingly looks like increasingly looks like an invisible technological war happening underneath this modern multiplayer gaming. Most players may never even directly see that battle happening, but it could end up shaping the future of competitive shooters for the next decade. Maybe the strangest part of all of this is that if AI anti-cheat eventually works, players won't actually even notice. There won't be any necessary dramatic moments or flashy announcements, just an invisible system quietly analyzing gameplay in the background, constantly asking the one most important question right now. Does this gameplay look human?